I'd like to say how honored I am to be here amongst this esteemed list of speakers and also guests. And when I, kind of thought, what's the reason why I was asked to speak here today? I tried to come up with the answer, and I think the answer really is, I hope that I can provide a sort of judgment platform for REDD Plus projects. I think it's often overlooked. How can we judge REDD Plus projects on the ground that are working? And I'm hoping that my talk provides a little bit of the tools that such a group can use in order to judge whether a project is good or bad. And I think we need technical information in order to do that. So I hope my talk isn't too dry. It will involve some technical information, but I do know the audience that I'm speaking to here. So if you have any more questions, I'd be happy to talk to any of you afterward. So my talk is called REDD Plus Applied because I'm going to be talking about how REDD Plus works on the ground and in projects. So real quickly, what is REDD Plus? Well, there are different answers for that question. And basically, what Wildlife Works, which is the company I work for, believes REDD Plus is a pay-for-performance concept. And it basically is a marked departure from traditional aid models, where, as Rob Dodson said on the wonderful video that you just saw, communities are being paid for action. This is not aid. This is not money that's just being thrown out of airplanes and that's being distributed without any kind of pointed targets. So REDD Plus is payment for, at the very bottom, payment for verified, additional, and permanent emission reductions. And it's important to remember that. I'll talk a little more about that, and you'll hear much more about that from David Antonioli from VCS and also from Joanna from the CCB. And so for REDD Plus to work, for success in REDD Plus, it entails something more attractive than the alternatives, which are logging, subsistence lifestyles that rely on forests, as Mike talked about, and other agricultural practices. Now, there are other reasons for deforestation, as we all know, but REDD Plus addresses those issues. So what will my talk cover? Well, there are different concepts of what REDD is, and what I'm going to talk about is the so-called bottom-up approach, where REDD is implemented on the ground and projects are running on the ground to directly offset potential emissions. Now, there's another concept for REDD that I think Mike talked about a bit, and that is this whole concept of developing the answer for the 7 billion ton problem all at once. That's kind of more the top-down approach that I won't be talking about so much, but we really believe that the bottom-up approach is the quickest and best way to address this problem. We are a project developer, Wildlife Works, and we are basically a member of the group that believes that the bottom-up approach is the most effective way to affect climate change mitigation. So the first thing I'm going to talk about, and that kind of delves into the more technical aspects of how a project works, is something that we do to decide whether or not we even engage in a project, and that's called feasibility or suitability analysis. And I don't have a lot of time to talk about the technical aspects of this particular way that we judge whether or not to engage in projects, but suffice it to say that feasibility analysis is and has been a very important aspect of what Wildlife Works does. We don't just take every project that's presented to us, and we've been presented with a lot of projects. So there are two main things that we look for when we're going through feasibility analysis, and that's threat of deforestation, and we also have to have a good forest intact, so carbon stocks. So we measure carbon. We do a pilot study and measure carbon to know how much carbon is in the forest before we can know whether or not we can run a project there. Sorry, I don't have more time to elaborate. So how do we measure, now this is, I'm going to go into talking more about how we measure historical deforestation, but this is after we've decided to engage in a project. So the most common question that somebody like me gets is, how do you establish your baseline or your reference level? And this is just a little example of how we at Wildlife Works measure historical deforestation. You have to know how much deforestation has occurred in the past in order to know how much carbon you're saving from being emitted into the atmosphere, and that's the whole concept of REDD. So here's an example. We have this is a project in the DRC, and that we are actively engaged in right now, and we measured deforestation basically by laying a grid of dots over some satellite imagery, and we empirically, when empirically means directly, measured deforestation throughout history. So in 1987, this particular patch of forested area contained 30.66% of forest. 2002, it was down to 22%. In 2011, it was down to 8.4%. And we're measuring this directly, so there's no kind of funny business or smoke and mirrors here. It's just measuring forests. And as you can see on the right, we basically are directly measuring the land cover that exists under these dots. So it's basically, this part here is not rocket science. So when we're done with this, we take that and throw it all into, actually, let me talk about this first. This is my fancy animation, just to give you an idea of what deforestation looks like. This is a different project in Cambodia, but so as you can see here, this is another historical deforestation event that we measured. And I just wanted you all to be able to see the devastating effects of what we're measuring here. So 1989, and the green indicates forest here. So this is an actual study that we did in Cambodia where the forest is actually disappearing at that rate. It seems absolutely impossible that this could happen, but it really is happening. I'm going to skip the second one because I don't have enough time, but it basically shows the same thing happening over real satellite imagery. So this looks really complicated. I don't have enough time to talk a lot about this, but all of that information gets thrown into a model, which is, you can see on the bottom right-hand side here. And we basically, we create a model that measures historical deforestation. And we do that by applying what's called a logistic curve to the actual deforestation that we measured. And then what we have to do, it's not enough to just measure deforestation. We have to know how many emissions that deforestation amounts to, or how much emission that deforestation amounts to. And I was going to spend some time talking about the makeup of a tree. I'll just gloss over it. Basically, we get from that model of deforestation to emissions by virtue of the fact that trees are made up mostly of the air, which is something that Richard Feynman actually said in 1983, the Nobel laureate. He popularized the fact that trees actually come from the air and not from the ground. So as Mike said, they play an incredible role in making sure that the earth is self-sustaining. So anyway, that's a bit of a digression. But the way we get to emissions from deforestation is that we know certain things about trees, primarily that a tree is about a quarter carbon. And we also know the relationship between carbon and carbon dioxide. So we're able to estimate how much carbon dioxide would be emitted into the atmosphere if a tree is burned. That's what this slide can basically be distilled into. Okay, so it's also not enough for us to just say, hey, this is how much emission we believe will happen in our projects. We have to prove it, and that's where validation and verification come in. So as you've heard a few times today, we're put through amazingly rigorous criteria, and we have to meet extremely stringent standards in order to prove that what we say is happening on the ground really is, and to prove that we really are protecting forests, and to prove that this is however much emission we say would have happened really would have happened. So you're going to hear much more about validation and verification, particularly the finer aspects of the standards from David and Joanna. I think David's speaking right after me, so I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but Wildlife Works has pledged to accredit all of their projects with both the verified carbon standard and the climate, community, and biodiversity standard. Both extremely important and stringent standards that have fallen out of the plethora of standards that used to exist as basically the most important standards out there. So both our project in Kenya and in the DRC, which are our two working projects, are both validated and verified with these two standards. Other elements that our projects that must be considered, both in our projects and in really any REDD Plus project on the ground, projects must be additional. So it's not enough to just say that we're doing something. We have to be doing something that's additional to what is already happening. So you can't go into an area and just set up shop and show that, measure what's already happening in the area. You have to create something new. That's the concept of additionality. Projects have to be permanent, so they have to be around for a while. You can't measure trees and then cut them all down the next year, which was happening, unfortunately, with some other companies. And projects must be verified. So you have to hire third party in the case of a voluntary project. You have to go in and hire auditors, and my job is to manage that process as well. So it's quite it can be a time-consuming process, but it's an absolutely necessary process where a third party will come in and verify what you've done on the ground. This is something that Wildlife Works takes very seriously, and any project developer should take very seriously. We have to be able to prove that what we've measured is real, it's additional, it's permanent, and we have to verify what we've said. So those are the main things to consider on a technical level, and I hope I didn't talk about extremely dry technical matter, and I think I'm probably 10 minutes over my time, but two more things to consider. Leakage, which everybody, you hear a lot said about leakage in the REDD Plus or in the carbon world. Leakage is the concept that if you stop something bad from happening, it could just move to the side, or it could just happen somewhere else. You have to either stop that from happening or pay a penalty. This is taken also very seriously. And the last thing that I mention here on the slide at the bottom is that every REDD Plus project or every avoided deforestation project must have a reference area. And this, I'm realizing now this is a little bit out of place, but the fact that historical deforestation has happened, you need to show that it happened, but you can't measure that historical deforestation in the area that you're protecting, because there would be no forest if the deforestation happened in the area you're protecting. So you have to have a good reference area, a proxy for what you are claiming would have happened in your project area that's happening somewhere else. And that's the concept of a reference area. Every avoided deforestation project must have one, and if it's going to work, has to have a good reference area that's very indicative of the project area. So again, that's a little bit out of place, but that's it. Thank you very much.
I'll take this slide.